When is enough enough? When am I willing to stand up, regardless of what the law is, for what is right? Law or no law, Constitution or no Constitution, William Lloyd Garrison made this declaration in 1841 in New Bedford, Massachusetts, among a group of abolitionists following a speech from the great Frederick Douglass after he had just recently escaped from slavery. Garrison wrote of the incident in the preface to Frederick Douglass's first autobiography, a book I highly recommend. He wrote, "A beloved friend from New Bedford prevailed on Mr. Douglass to address the convention. He came forward to the platform with a hesitancy and embarrassment, necessarily the attendance of a sensitive mind in such a novel position. After apologizing for his ignorance and reminding the audience that slavery was a poor school for the human intellect and heart, he proceeded to narrate some of the facts in his own history as a slave, and in the course of his speech gave utterance to many noble thoughts and thrilling reflections. As soon as he had taken his seat, I rose and declared that Patrick Henry of Revolutionary fame never made a speech more eloquent in the cause of liberty than the one we had just listened to from the lips of that hunted fugitive. So I believed at the time, such is my belief now. I reminded the audience of the peril which surrounded this self-emancipated young man at the North, even in Massachusetts, on the soil of the Pilgrim Fathers among the descendants of revolutionary sires, and I appealed to them whether they would ever allow him to be carried back into slavery. Law or no law, Constitution or no Constitution. The response was a unanimous and in thunderous tones, no. Will you succor and protect him as a brother man, a resident of the old Bay State? Yes, shouted the whole mass with an energy so startling that the ruthless tyrants south of Mason and Dixon's line might almost have heard the mighty burst of feeling and recognized it as the pledge of an invincible determination on the part of those who gave it, never to betray him that wanders, but to hide the outcast, and firmly to abide the consequences. While it's easy to look back now and say, obviously, the institution of slavery is wrong and immoral, history proves that if you were alive at that time, you likely would have taken part in the system and supported it, or stood by silently while it happened. We have a lot to unpack here, and as the size of government continues to grow and it pervades ever more areas of our lives, we all have to stop and ask ourselves, what is my line? When is enough enough? When am I willing to stand up, regardless of what the law is, for what is right? So hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and let's get into this. My name is Stephanie Edmonds. Welcome to Teaching Liberty. To live free, you have to think free, and I'm going to really need you to open your mind up on this one. When is it appropriate to deliberately defy the law? To be clear, I don't mean just avoiding a law. I mean actively speaking out against unjust laws, and if the circumstances call for it, openly defying unjust laws, just as William Lloyd Garrison did in the face of the brutal and inhumane institution of slavery, which he deemed as sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States. I want to start off by saying I'm very thankful we don't live in the time of William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass, that we don't have to make the choices that they had to make. These are different times. Nonetheless, it would be wrong to dismiss the examples of Garrison and Douglass as inappropriate to draw upon for comparison and inspiration for standing up to unjust government actions that are happening today. Indeed, if the government can mandate that you have to take an experimental pharmaceutical product, or you'll lose your job, or you'll be unable to enter into certain spaces, are we really free? Personally, 2021 was my line. After lockdowns and school closures, and then fighting to get schools open, and then boom, vaccine mandates. At that point, I had spent the past 10 years of my life becoming a teacher, really buying into that system, going to grad school, being a tutor, becoming a classroom teacher in New York City, getting tenured. But when I was faced with that ultimatum of take the jab or lose your job, that was my line. Everything that I had been working towards was worth giving up to keep my bodily autonomy. I lived off my savings. I completely changed my lifestyle. I dedicated my time and energy to speaking out against the mandates because I knew they were wrong. I took actions, defied the law because I knew it was wrong. And now I didn't get arrested. There were freedom fighters out there who did take that step and go that far. Personally, as a single mom, it wasn't something I could do. You have to decide in every situation, what is your line? How far are you willing to go? It wasn't actually until the next year, the fall of 2022, that I came into contact with the words of William Lloyd Garrison through the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, which, by the way, I think should be required reading in every middle or high school American history course. Ever since I read these words, they haven't been far from my mind. And I realize not every person can speak out on every issue. And not every issue is going to move every person to speak out. But with that in mind, I do think a reasonable person can ask, when is enough enough? When are people going to stand up and speak out for their rights and for the rights of the people around them? Recently, it feels like it happens all the time now. There was a video that went viral of a transgender track athlete absolutely destroying the actual female track athletes. And it wasn't even close and just so obviously ridiculous. Here's the video and just listen to the announcers.
Wilhelmina, Jaden Vanderbeek. In 7 for Bergen Episcopal, Abby Wilson. Out very well is Gallagher, McDaniel in lane 2. You're going to see Gallagher later on in the relays.
Look how far ahead.
Great drive.
Commenting on the forum.
Gallagher, the victory here in section number 1. 25:49.
It's like several seconds ahead of the females. Like, we're all just going to sit around and pretend that this boy achieved something. And that's not even getting into the opportunities that he's taking away from girls. Now, this isn't slavery, but just as slavery was a controversial issue that wasn't talked about in polite society, transgenderism is a controversial issue that isn't talked about in polite society. People know it's wrong. Anybody who has eyes can see it's wrong, but nobody wants to, people destabilize the status quo. Nobody wants to be controversial. There's a brilliant video that just came out showing this in action. There's a young reporter, and she's at the NCAA track championships, and she's asking people 2 questions. The first is, what do they know about Title IX? And what do they know about the changes that the Biden administration is attempting to make to Title IX? Before we watch the video, let's go over Title IX and the proposed changes. Title IX is a federal statute that was ratified in 1972 with the intended purpose of protecting students from sex-based discrimination in education programs or other activities that receive federal financial assistance. I know for my mother, growing up when she was in high school, girls could only do swimming and gymnastics, whereas the boys had basketball, baseball, football, many options. And so Title IX, in large part, was meant to rectify that problem, among other funding disparities. Now, The Biden administration is attempting to radically alter Title IX by redefining sex discrimination to include the disparate treatment on the basis of gender identity, meaning that, in effect, if a boy identifies as a girl, then they can participate in the girl sport. So essentially, the Biden administration is conflating biological sex with gender identity and saying if you don't allow a male who identifies as a female to participate in the female version of the sport, you are discriminating against them and violating their civil rights. In response to the proposed change, Riley Gaines, the former collegiate swimmer who was forced to change with and swim against transgender Leah Thomas, stated, "Under the proposed rule, women's sports aren't just for women. They're for anyone who simply says they are a woman." With that in mind, let's watch this video and see exactly how such nonsense is allowed to prevail.
Oh, this is political now. Oh, no, we're not going to do this. Sorry.
Do you think this will have an impact on women's sports?
Probably. I don't really want to answer these questions very well. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's tricky stuff. Obviously.
Yeah.
And I've I've got daughters of my own. I'm obviously here. I love this. And there's a lot of wide-ranging things that are way above my pay grade that I don't have all the answers to right now.
I think it's sad. I mean, really, for women to work as hard as they do, and then to have someone who is not a woman but thinks they are step in and win. It's ridiculous.
Do you feel that the NCAA is doing a good job to protect those values of Title IX?
I would say so, yeah.
Not entirely.
The NCAA is doing whatever it is they're told from above, and that's not protecting.
Would it be controversial?
I don't either.
How would you feel if a biological male identifying as a woman wanted to compete? Do you feel that it would be okay for a biological male to transition to a woman and compete against the swimmers here today?
I gotta walk
I don't know that we
No comment.
I would rather not talk anymore. I just don't want to.
Above your pay grade, right?
Okay. All right, thank you for your time.
This is very scary. Can you not?
Oh, it's scary.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Men playing in women's sports is not the same thing as slavery. However, like the institution of slavery, there is a lot of institutional power behind the transgender movement. That means that those who speak out against it often face backlash, social consequences, and even legal ones. And this is true of many issues at every level of government, federal, state, and local. When you speak out against injustices and stand up for what is right, you will face backlash from people in power and their beneficiaries. The only question is, what is your line? And what are you willing to do to stand up for what is right? Let me know your thoughts in those comments down below. Don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. And now I'll leave you with these two quotes. "That which is not just is not law." William Lloyd Garrison. "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." Frederick Douglass. Until next time, think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.
Come on.